off to Jonathan Taylor. Huge hole. He's at the 30. He's going to go. 10, 5, touchdown. Jonathan Taylor made a man miss the line of scrimmage and then runs it into Pater. A one-handed INT. Are you kidding me? Kenny Moore.
What a play by Nyheim Hines. What's going on, Colts Nation? Welcome back to another Bring the Juice podcast live stream. Guys, it has been a while. It feels like we haven't really done basically a live stream like this in a while. And today we have a very special guest. We have the producer of the Kevin's Corner podcast for 93.5, 107.5 FM radio and 1070 AM The Fan. Chris Presley is joining us. Chris, how are you today?
I'm good, guys. How are you? Thanks for having me.
Oh, it's awesome, man. I appreciate it. Well, listen, man, we're glad you're here. There's one thing I have to ask, two things I have to ask when everybody guest comes in here. But the one thing I will ask that's off the record, J.J. Watt, the big news today. Everybody's been talking about it. Everybody's got their opinion on it. How do you feel knowing that J.J. Watt, the lifelong Houston Texan, is out of the AFC South? And also, how do you feel knowing he went to a team and that we're still going to have to face this next year?
Yeah, those are going to be my 2 points. One, a little sigh of relief initially, especially when you see the contract number. I know it was kind of tossed around. The Colts might try and go get him. You got to kick the tires, right? But apparently we didn't. And he threw us off the trail a little bit. You know, everyone kept saying Buffalo, Pittsburgh, Green Bay. Arizona was never mentioned, at least from what I had been seeing. So the fact that he announced it the way he did it, I like that he kind of took a jab at sources. Thought that was funny. Glad he's out of the division, but like you said, I tweeted right when it happened. Even though he's out of the division, we play them next year. So we don't get to officially say goodbye to him until the 2022 season.
Yeah, unfortunate. But look, man, I got one question to ask, and thank you to the 65 of you that are in here currently. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe, guys. Be sure to become a member today if you haven't already. Hit that join button down below right next to the like and comment button. I appreciate it. But listen, Chris, I got to ask you because you brought it up right before we went live. The Andrew Luck news. I hate to bring it up to the chat once again. I'm sorry, guys. You know I have to do this. Every time I bring somebody new on, I have to get where they were at, what was going through their mind when that news broke. So give us the story here, Chris. What were you doing? And what was your immediate reaction when you heard that?
So a buddy of mine, a good friend, his mother's birthday was that day. So they rented out this pool house up in Carmel and had a country artist come in and do a little bit of a live show. It was this big secret surprise for her. Thought it was going to be a quiet night and relative of sporting news because I knew the Bears were in town. Let's be honest, you don't really pay too much attention to the preseason at that point in time. This year would have been different, especially with COVID, just hoping for some sports to be back. So I kind of was off my phone. I wasn't really paying attention to anything, and my phone starts flooding. And that's never a good thing when your phone starts flooding, typically.
Yeah.
Especially when you're a Colts fan, you think the worst. So then I start to check, is this the real Adam Schefter or is this the fake Adam Schefter? Because we've all been there before, too, where we get duped. Sure enough, it's the real Adam Schefter. And I kind of felt bad for my friend's mom because my friend and I then exit said pool house and go outside and talk for like an hour and a half of what are we going to do? Where do we go now? What's happening? The sky is falling. Then you kind of go through all the stages. You know, it's denial. And then it's, you know, you're trying to self-heal and you're talking yourself into all these different situations that you hope can happen. But realistically, you know, probably aren't. So that was my Andrew Luck night.
Yeah. I think Cody and I both can sit here and agree that night was not good. I'm not ashamed to admit I cried a little bit that night because, you know, knowing what this Colts team was becoming with number 12 right there, and then to have that happen, it was a real shot to the gut. It really was.
Yeah, it's funny, like, you know, like you said, like checking the Adam Schefter tweets. Like when the Carson News went broke earlier a couple weeks ago, I had to do the same thing. I was like, I've literally seen this tweet like already like 10 times, but like from fake accounts, you know? So when it's like real, there's just like that. It's an interesting feeling. You're just like, oh my goodness, this is actually happening. Obviously, the Carson Wentz one's a little bit more on the positive side, and this one's more on the negative side. But yeah, dude, it was just crazy. I remember that. Like, that's the one time I've seen Derek cry. Was that that night?
I was bad. I was really bad.
It was bad, man. I have never just been like just sitting there and just like so paralyzed. Like, I have no idea what to do. Like, I've never been to that point when covering the Colts that like it's just been like that. So. Oh, it's just crazy, man. Crazy. Well, Chris, let's talk about a little bit. So this offseason's been obviously really crazy for the Colts so far. I mean, they already have found their franchise quarterback potentially in Carson Wentz. What are some big things that you've kind of taken away? I know you and Kevin obviously talk about Colts stuff on the weekly. What are some of the biggest things that you and Kevin have really kind of gathered from the Colts offseason so far?
Yeah, well, the first thing is I'm on the circle right now. So if you hear a lot of motorcycle engines revving or things of that nature, it's just outside noise. So hopefully we keep it down. But the main thing is we kind of laugh when we say the term offseason. It hasn't really been an offseason. And for us, we're fortunate. As fans, we're fortunate. It seems like every week there's something different and some other story that we can either talk about via podcast or we can write articles about. It's great for ratings. It's great for us as Colts Nation. So the big things is just taking the dominoes as they've started to fall. Obviously, once the Phillip Rivers news broke, you kind of got an inkling. Did they push him out? Did he know that he was going to be replaced? Is he doing this on his own? So then you focus to, okay, now who's the next quarterback going to be? Then it's Matthew Stafford. Then once Stafford goes to LA, then I start to get nervous because that was too rich for my blood. So now I think the quarterback market's going to be driven way up. And I don't necessarily want to pay that for any of the quarterbacks that are out there other than Deshaun Watson, which at that point you're going to give up the farm. Right. So with realistic quarterbacks, I started to get a little bit nervous. And I just thank Chris Ballard for calling the bluff of the Eagles, staying pat, and getting what I think is going to be arguably a steal.
Yeah, I mean, let's talk about that trade here for a second because, from what it sounded like, a lot of people were originally saying that the Eagles leaked a supposed what the Colts were supposedly asking, the 2 seconds and maybe like a third or fourth. Apparently that's what the Eagles said Chris Ballard gave them, but apparently the third rounder and the conditional second was the only offer that Ballard ever really gave them, is what the final source said about that. I mean, it sounds like, this, and we've talked to a lot of Eagles people. They said that the Colts just fleeced the Eagles when it comes to, the cream of the crop here when it came to this, because, the Eagles were asking for 2 firsts for Carson Wentz at the beginning of it, which we all knew they weren't going to get. I mean, what's your overall thoughts on, this trade? I mean, I know Frank Reich's not allowed to talk about it just yet, but right. I mean, for a third rounder and a second, which, could become a first if he plays enough. I mean, that seems like a low price for a potential for franchise quarterback. Yeah.
I mean, to me, we want that to be a first round pick. As weird as that sounds, you want that to be a first round pick because that means you've obviously gone into the playoffs and he's played over 70 to 75% of the snaps. That's what you need out of your quarterback, especially on a 2-year deal where he's trying to work for what should probably be his last one, maybe second to last one, depending on how long he can last in the league. But he's had a lot of injury problems so far. Like I said, for me, I feel like we won the draft just initially. Obviously, there's a lot to tell. When I go back and look at my tweets, I'll be the first to raise my hand and say, last year, I cussed Wentz when I would watch him on primetime. I was like, this dude doesn't have it. He's lost it. He's not the quarterback anymore. And then again, just like we do, or at least I do as an optimist, I sit back and I say, okay, but look who we had around him. Look at the way that front office has been in turmoil. As you guys know, since you've talked to the Philly fans, they are so past that front office that they would rather get rid of their front office than Carson Wentz at this point. And then you look at the fact that he's coming back to Frank Reich. I think he needed a change of scenery. And I'll go as far as to even go out on the branch and the limb to say a guy from North Dakota who's moving to Indiana can get some farmland, can go hunting, get out of that Philadelphia media world, come back to Frank Reich, who shares his Christian values. I think it's just going to be a good change of a good start of a new chapter for him.
Yeah. Oh, no, for sure. I guess that can kind of lead to the next topic conversation. You kind of already touched on it a little bit, like the difference. Like we saw, obviously there are two different cases with Phillip Rivers and Carson Wentz, but we saw that a little bit with Phillip Rivers had a really rough, probably one of his worst seasons of his career in that 2019 season, then comes in, is paired with Frank Reich, paired with a better just overall team around him, and that's a lot better season. Why do you think personally that this is a lot better of a situation for Carson Wentz and probably his best situation to succeed?
I think the way that Frank Reich just dials up play calls, even when you watch Frank throughout the season, if you look back at the game film, which I know you guys do and a lot of our fans do because we do have a very well-educated fan base, you could see that the wrinkles weren't all thrown out at one time. He waited and would put different things in at different times. And I think I'll even go as far as to say a guy like Nyheim Hines might be the Derek Sproles for Carson Wentz in the sense that if you remember, Darren Sproles ended his career with Philadelphia and actually played pretty well for the age and the tread that were on the tires. I think moving people around the way that hopefully Paris Campbell can do if he stays healthy, depending on what wide receiver we might get in the draft or free agency, and hopefully if T.Y. Hilton comes back, we have a really good offense that Jonathan Taylor then hopefully isn't rushing into 8 men in the box every week. That RPO and that play action hopefully is either going to open things up for Jonathan Taylor or they're going to open things up for the receivers to get behind the defenders, as you saw Nelson Aguilar and Deshaun Jackson and people like that do with Carson when he was in Philadelphia.
Yeah, and you were totally right that when people were talking about the Eagles fans would rather want to get rid of their higher ups in the organization than Wentz. Some of the podcasters we talked about were saying that the biggest issue here is not Wentz, it's not the team, it's not anybody else. It's simply Howie Roseman and all of them up at the top level because they are the ones ruining this team. I mean, it's starting to get, shall we say it's a lot of what Colts fans were saying about Ryan Grigson a couple years ago that, it's the GM, it's whatever, everybody has their ways of dealing with it. But yeah, Eagles fans are just not happy with it. I think more Eagles fans were upset at losing Wentz than initially what Colts fans were happy of having Wentz. So yeah, it's kind of weird how that domino works. Oh man, hold on a second. Damo Wiggly with the $10 super sticker. Thank you for that very much. I appreciate it. Thank you for the super chat. $10. Thank you very much, Damo Wiggly. Appreciate it. Cody, did you have something you wanted to say there?
Yeah. So you mentioned T.Y. Hilton, hopefully re-signing him. Now T.Y. came out with a tweet that's kind of, he's had a couple like cryptic tweets that you're just like, okay, what does this exactly mean? He came out with one today, was basically saying whatever free agent team, signs me, I'm going to be putting my effort all in there. He didn't basically say I'm leaving the Colts, but he didn't say home run, I'm staying with the Colts. What are your thoughts on T.Y. Hilton overall? Do you want him to stay with the Colts? We know what kind of player T.Y. Hilton is. I look right now and I have a T.Y. Hilton jersey framed right below me. Right. So that tells you how much I love T.Y. Hilton. But I want to get your take on kind of where he is right now as a player over the age of 30, has dealt with a little bit of injuries and hasn't posted a 1,000-yard season in a couple of years. What are your thoughts overall on re-signing T.Y. Hilton versus, maybe going to get another guy in free agency or draft like you mentioned?
So my thought on it is I wonder how much Chris Ballard is going to let him test the market before we reach out and try and negotiate a deal. Obviously, Chris Ballard likes T.Y. Hilton. Colts Nation in Indianapolis loves T.Y. Hilton. T.Y. Hilton really grew up and became a man here in Indianapolis. Not to take anything away from him before that. That's not what I'm meaning. I'm just saying he was a guy who came in and got to learn under Reggie Wayne. And then when Reggie left, he got to be the man. And even though he's been dinged up and he's starting to lose a little bit of a step, he's doing almost the equivalent of what a high flyer in the NBA does when they lose that spring in their knees and they become an outside shooter. T.Y. Hilton's still one of the best route runners in all of football. So even though that speed, which is still very, very good speed, I'm not knocking
it's good speed.
Right, he can still create separation. And look how many times late in the season, or late in games, I should say, last year, when they needed a catch, especially something towards the sideline to extend game clock as we try to get in scoring possession, we're going to TY. So it doesn't matter how quiet he's been all game. That's still your first look as a quarterback.
Yeah, I totally agree. So I hate to go back to this JJ Watt thing, but apparently this has been blowing up over the last hour that somebody is reporting that what was talked about with JJ Watt and the deals. So supposedly, I can't remember which two teams. I think it was the Browns and the Colts supposedly offered more money to JJ Watt to come there, but he chose to go to Arizona versus them. So I don't know whether I agree with that or not, Cody. I really don't. I don't know if I'd agree with that or not. I mean, first off, I don't anticipate Chris Ballard wanting to spend $16+ million a year on a guy that's 32 years old. And, no offense to JJ Watt, but he's on the back end of his career and he's not going to be around for much longer. And I mean, why would he spend that kind of money? And really, is there that much of a difference with Indianapolis and the Cardinals? I don't really think there's that much more leaning towards the Cardinals that would make him want to go there versus, I know it's closer than Indianapolis. I know it's warmer in Arizona than it is in Indianapolis half the year. But I mean, I just don't believe that. I don't believe that at all. I can't.
Yeah, I think that's where you need to delineate. Is there more of a difference between the Colts and the Cardinals, not Arizona and Indianapolis? Because when it comes to Arizona and Indianapolis, there's a little bit of a difference. I don't see. Can you imagine? Does JJ Watt swing a golf club? I can't even imagine that dude swinging golf clubs. He's not going there. So yeah, you're right. But at the same time, where my head first went is with all this Russell Wilson news. Is Russ like, listen? Now I already won out of here, and now you're adding this guy into the division. No, I'm good.
Right.
Go ahead and get out of here.
It's almost at a point where it's like maybe we could have waited. Maybe we could have waited for this Russell Wilson stuff to just spew up a little more. Maybe the Colts could have thrown the farm at Russell Wilson.
Right.
I don't know, but that's just makeup. But in regards to the TY stuff, yeah, it's starting to just sound more and more likely to me that TY is not anticipating coming back because, everyone in the building has said the same thing. They want T.Y. Hilton back. They just want him at this price. Mm-hmm. Well, if T.Y. Hilton liked that price, then he wouldn't be saying, okay, I'm going off in free agency. I don't think that that's something that he would do. I mean, if he's testing his free agent, I don't know if he's playing it in a sense of maybe trying to see if somebody will pay him huge bucks to come back to somewhere. But I mean, it's starting to sound more and more likely that he does not expect himself to come back. I don't know.
Yeah, and I thought it was pretty intriguing seeing Pat McAfee, who clearly still bleeds blue when it comes to Indy.
Yeah.
But he mentioned, hey, TY, go to Tampa, man. You're from Florida. Head back home. Try and get a quick ring. Tom's going to be there for a couple more years and potentially. That was a little concerning. And then TY, again, back to Cody talking about the cryptic. He didn't necessarily shy away from it, but he didn't lean into it either. It was kind of this, I can't remember the exact verbiage, but it didn't leave you feeling warm and cuddly inside like, oh, he's coming back.
He's entertaining the idea of possibly going somewhere else.
Yeah.
I love all with the $2 super chat. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. I would miss TY. Yeah, I think all Colts Nation would miss TY. T.Y. Hilton is in most people's opinion, the third best wide receiver that Indianapolis has ever had. So, when you look at the numbers sake. So, yeah, T.Y. Hilton's a Colts legend, whether he finishes his career out here or not.
I kind of wonder. Sorry, Chris. I kind of wonder from like a T.Y. Hilton perspective. I mean, how many quarterbacks has this guy played with after Andrew Luck? I mean, it's been a lot. So why wouldn't you want to go with a more proven, like Carson Wentz? We don't know right now. He was terrible. Frankly, he was terrible in 2020. So maybe T.Y. Hilton's like, look, like I love Indianapolis, but I want a chance at a ring. I want to play with Tom Brady. Like I don't fault him for that. He's getting a little bit older. He's even said next contract I sign will be my last one. So if he goes and wins a ring, I can't fault the guy, man, for making that decision. I mean, similar to like Joe Haig last year in certain ways, who left to go sign with and play with Tampa. Like, I understand it at the same time, like going to play with a legend. Like, why wouldn't you do that? So I get that from T.Y.'s perspective as well. Like, only one more contract. Why wouldn't you go to a team that just won the Super Bowl,
Absolutely.
Colts talks in here, Cody. Apparently, you forgot Matt Hasselbeck.
Oh,
He's
no,
not
I
happy
did
that
not.
you forgot. You forgot Matt Hasselbeck. Okay.
No, I didn't.
I don't even remember what year was that when he played. I forget.
2015, I think.
Was it? I can't remember
that
what
was
year.
Like the start of the end, right there.
Hey,
yeah.
I'll give credit to Matt Hasselbeck that year, though. He was like an Alex Smith kind of guy. He was a game manager. He didn't throw games away, but he wasn't, making the offense amazing. So he was doing enough for us to win games. That's all I'll say.
Right.
He was playing with like E. coli after eating Chipotle. I mean, the guy just gutted it through.
If the comparison fits, Double Wicked another $5 chat. Thank you, Cody. What free agent wide receivers would you like if T.Y. is gone?
Oh man,
we're going into this conversation again. Man.
Okay, so I mean, the obvious. We've talked about Allen Robinson. We've talked about Chris Godwin. We've talked about Kenny Golladay. Those are like the three, I think, that like everybody's like, I want the Colts to sign one of them. And I don't think necessarily if T.Y. leaves, you need to go break the bank, sign a guy for $25 million a year or whatever they're asking for. I look at a guy like Corey Davis, guy like Curtis Samuel, the tier 2 type of receivers that are still fairly young, that still have some upside, that you're not going to have to pay that much money to. I just don't get like, the whole like, oh, we got to just break the bank at wide receiver. I don't think you necessarily need to. I think this pool of like free agents, wide receivers, even if you don't get one of those guys, you get like a Marvin Jones, a guy like that, more of a proven type of guy. I think the Colts could do that. And I wouldn't be opposed to that, bringing in a guy that can kind of, you're not paying a ton, but he's also fairly productive with Carson Wentz. I know I've heard a little bit about, Nelson Aguilar. I know I've heard that name kind of come up a little bit. And a lot of people think of him back in his Philly days, but I mean, the guy had like 900 yards the last season. So he's still a pretty solid receiver there. So there's a lot of different names. There's a lot that I missed, but I personally would go tier 2 receiver. Chris, I'm curious, what are some guys that you've kind of looked at that you're kind of interested, if they do hit the open market?
See, that's where my whole thing, and this is where I respect Chris Ballard, not to dodge your question, is you have it's cornerback, wide receiver, defensive end, and cornerback, wide receiver, defensive end are your main ones you're looking at right now, right?
Yep.
So,
yeah.
Ballard, early in his career, would trade back to stock up picks. And then all of a sudden, he's trading first-round picks for defensive tackles. And then all of a sudden, he's giving up some picks for a quarterback, but he's trading back to do that. So I don't necessarily know what Ballard wants to do. And free agency for me is going to be so fun because, and the thing that helps us, the people that are fans that have podcasts or work in media, is we have to cover every angle and be ready for every angle because we have no clue where it's coming from. And even if we think we know where it's coming from, we don't know where it's coming from.
Yeah, right.
Ballard today with Julie Marinaro was saying, well, if you would read between the lines, I say it in those interviews. No, you don't. You might think you say it in those interviews, but we watch it over and over again.
Cricket people.
You don't say those. You don't say it between the lines. So I think the biggest thing for me is I want to see which of those pieces he addresses in free agency so I can have a little bit more understanding of what we're going to address in the draft. So
right.
An offensive tackle, that's the other one I was looking for. So not to dodge the question, I do like all the receivers that you mentioned, and I do agree with the fact of like a Marvin Jones or someone from a tier 2 that we could get at a cheaper price, but still can come in. I mean, hell, remember Inman came in and played well for us. We've been able to get some guys that are on the back end of their career, and they might not be, superstars anymore or to that level, but they produce enough, especially with, like I mentioned earlier, all the different weapons that we currently have on offense. You don't necessarily need to overpay for a piece. And let's look at it. Chris Ballard hasn't really overpaid for the wide receiver piece. So if he does, it's going to be the first time he's really gone after a wide receiver name in his tenure here with Indianapolis.
And I think to hop off of Cody's argument there on going for a tier 2 wide receiver, I mean, I've made this argument over the last year, and I think it continues every year to validate my point that having a star wide receiver is really not the most important ingredient to a Super Bowl winning team. I mean, would just take this last year. The offense for the Chiefs was easily had better weapons, but ultimately, what won Tampa Bay the game? The ability to run the football. Their offensive line was better. Their defensive ability to get to the other opposing quarterback was better. I mean, all of those things ultimately made Tampa Bay win versus the Chiefs winning. I mean, I can go several different times. I actually continue to say that a top-tier tight end is actually more important than a top-tier wide receiver, because if you look back at all of the teams who keep making it to the Super Bowl, just look at their tight ends and see where they're ranked. Like Travis Kelce's been back to a couple. George Kittle was there for a year. Zach Ertz a couple years ago when he was a top 5 tight end was there. Gronk coming back, being a really good tight end this year. He helped them out. I mean, I continuously see this trend where tight ends are becoming more pivotal in these offenses and more useful than what these wide receivers are in the stretch. I mean, I think ultimately Ballard's playing the chips right, not spending all your cap on a guy who, you know, when he gets to the playoffs, if he gets shut down one game, he's not going to help you.
Right. I mean, I'll piggyback off that point just here quickly. I don't know if you guys heard this week and everything I love mock drafts, but at the same time, they're mock drafts for a reason. And Mel Kiper's Mel Kiper, so he's, you know, those guys need clicks. I believe he said that he thinks the Jets are going to trade back to 4, and with the 4th pick, they're going to draft Kyle or Pitts out of Florida, the tight end.
I thought, who was it that said that the other day on Fox? It was either Cowherd or Daniel Jeremiah that said that they were going to stay at number 2 and pick Kyle Pitts. I mean, that was even worse. I'm like, number 2 pick on Kyle Pitts? Are you serious?
But I'll tell you what, even though mock drafts are so out of this world, that's the most Jets move of all time. Like that's actually probably pretty realistic.
Yeah.
At number 2 and not address all the other issues that they need to address.
Offensive line, defensive line, corner. I mean,
your roster.
Your roster. Yeah, that's even better.
Yeah, no. Derek, I kind of think I know somebody's in the comments. I haven't looked at the comments, but I know somebody's in the comments say, did Derek seriously say the Chiefs have better weapons than the Bucs did? The Bucs had freaking Godwin, Mike Evans, Gronkowski, and Antonio Brown. So I just wanted to call you on that one. I don't agree with that.
Well, I'm talking in specific in relation to Tyreek Hill, who's easily the most explosive wide receiver on the field at any given time. Okay, Tyreek Hill.
I just had to play devil's advocate.
I don't care what people want to say about that. I mean, we know Travis Kelce's the best tight end in football, and Tyreek Hill, when at his peak, is at a top 5 level. As good as the collection of people, the weapons that Tampa Bay had, they're not on the peak level of what the Chiefs have. They don't. And honestly, I like to say this, that the wide receivers and the tight ends and the running backs were the main reason why the Chiefs lost, because they couldn't catch the freaking football. You know how many times Patrick Mahomes threw a touchdown pass to one of them and they let it go right through their hands? I mean, I think can count at least 2 times. I mean, that game would have been completely different had they just been able to actually catch the ball that day. I don't know what happened. Right. They were able to do it all season, but then they couldn't do it in the Super Bowl. I don't know why. It's like their face mask was getting more work in their hands. I don't know what was going on.
He almost stuffed it right in a couple face masks there, and just he didn't even need hands. Just
even on that throw where he threw it 30 yards where he was falling, threw it perfect to his running back. His running back catches it. It's a touchdown. Boom, hits the face mask, and it's like, oh, poor Patrick Mahomes. Poor Patrick Mahomes. I felt so bad for him that day.
And then you look at his $500 million contract, and
I mean, you're like, do I really feel that sorry for him? Nah, he's rich at the end of the day. It doesn't matter. Well, he doesn't get paid that for another year at least. So, the Chiefs buy themselves one more year to play around with that contract, and then they're screwed afterwards.
So I got a question for you guys. I don't know if I know you've gotten credentials before to the Senior Bowl. Have you guys ever done the combine?
No, I would love to do that at some point.
I'm pretty disappointed that it's not here this year. Or
very upset about that.
Yeah, well, hopefully, man, we have training camp because I would love to go down there and see you guys.
Yeah.
I was there a couple years ago when they did have it. I believe it was the 2019 training camp. And so I was down there for a day, got to say hi to KB and some of the other reporters down there. That was a pretty cool thing, pretty cool experience, man. And so I'm looking forward to it. I really hope that they do have it because it is like one of the coolest experiences. Just be literally like, I was like 2 feet away from like T.Y. Hilton and, Darius Leonard and stuff. And it was just like, man, from a fanboy perspective, I was like, this is insane. Like, right. I can't believe I'm here. So,
they do a great job up there at Grand Park. They really do.
They do. Yes, they do. It's beautiful up there, man. It's like heaven, man, for Colts fans.
Yeah.
Okay. So we kind of touched on it a little bit, Chris, and you kind of mentioned some of your positions of need. If you had to rank some of the positions, so say your top 4 positions of need for the Indianapolis Colts, you mentioned some of them, but I want to get your top ones. Where would they be? Start at 4 and build up to 1.
I think 4 is going to be corner.
Okay.
With Marvell Tell coming back, I'm hoping that he can be like plugged in right away. It really sucks that we weren't able to have him this year, but due to family circumstances and obviously COVID, everyone has their right to do whatever they want. So really stinks not to get him another year of prep, especially when you're on a rookie deal. So I'd say cornerback, and again, it all goes to who we sign. So if we get Xavier Rhodes, that's my number 4. If Xavier Rhodes walks, and now we're looking at Rocky Sean, Marvell Tell, Kenny Moore, that might slide up to number 3. Number 3 is probably, I'll say, wide receiver.
Okay.
Only for the sense that, again, I feel like Paris Campbell coming back, if he can stay healthy, some of the other pieces that we might be able to go get, Carson Wentz coming back to an offense that he knows and being able to throw in those other wrinkles, as I mentioned. If Phillip Rivers, as everyone, I don't know if we can cuss on here, as everyone crapped on him, can take us 11-5. I feel confident.
You already said COVID, so this one's going to get demonetized anyway. So go right ahead. It doesn't matter.
Oh, no, really? Sorry.
Yeah. YouTube is weird like that. YouTube actually will demonetize your live stream if you mention COVID. Not to trash anything or do anything like that, but if you mention the word COVID, you instantly get demonetized. I hate it.
All right, well, send me an invoice. I will try and really paying you guys for that. I did not realize that.
No, you're all good. I recognized it. I was like, well, it's all right. I do that sometimes too, so it's not a big deal.
We've done it plenty. Don't worry.
Yeah.
I'll probably then go. I will probably then go edge and then offensive tackle. I think.
Oh, okay. See, okay, you're one of those. A lot of people like to flip those.
No, and those are very interchangeable. I mean, you look at Justin Houston; he's coming up towards the end of his career. Kamoko Toure really hasn't panned out as to what we hoped he would be. Anthony Walker's probably going to walk, which doesn't help the backside of that defense at the linebacker position. So you do need pressure on him, especially when DeForest Buckner. Heck, you look at Houston's sack numbers. He had decent sack numbers. How many of those sacks were forced because DeForest Buckner made the quarterback get outside of the pocket right into the arms of Justin Houston? So I can completely understand if people say edge rush at number 1. But for me, going back to your Super Bowl reference, looking at Patrick Mahomes in the Super Bowl without those offensive tackles, and if you're bringing Carson Wentz in and not having someone protect his blind side, I always have to protect that quarterback.
Yeah. No, see, this is the argument I always make, and I may be wrong here, but this is kind of my thought process is like, look, for some of the pass rushers you have at defensive end, they're not like dominant guys, but you still have some guys you can bring back, right? You still have Houston potentially. You still have Autry. At offensive tackle, you have literally nobody right now that you would feel comfortable plugging at your left tackle. So like you have some guys you can, I hate to say like get by with because that sounds like really bad, like negative, but you can still be okay there at defensive end from a depth standpoint. Whereas from offensive tackle standpoint, you have to get a guy. Like you have to get somebody who's going to be able to go in there and really play well, really. And even if he plays decent, like you just need somebody in there that you feel like you can groom and grow. Whereas defensive end, you've invested how many, 3, I guess you can count, if you count Tyquan Lewis, 3 second-round picks in defensive linemen, defensive end guys. So you have some talent, I think a lot more talent and a lot more potential there than you do at offensive tackle. So that's kind of my thought process why I would say, yeah, offensive tackle is probably number 1 for me as well.
Cody, are you looking at the group chat right now?
No.
Chris, I'm sorry. This is off the comp here, but no, Cody, the guy that I told you said that the Colts and the Browns may offer more money to JJ Watt, the guy who's spreading that out. Eric responded to him and said lies and was trying to ask him a question, and now he's DMing him. He's DMing him about it. Yeah, like okay. He's actually wanting to explain himself on why he said that. I don't know what's happening there. He's showing us the messages as it's going, but I had to get you to see it, dude. It's crazy.
That's interesting.
That is really interesting. Yeah. And, I've been saying left tackle as well because I made that same argument, like there's, Houston and Autry. Reportedly, people have been saying that Ballard wants to bring both of them back if he can help it. Because, they're older. There's not going to be a big market for guys like them. Nobody's really going to pay them big bucks. So you could probably bring them back cheap. But, with left tackle, he's right. Unless you decide to either move Quentin Nelson out there, like some people said they would, or you move Danny Pinter out there, which makes no sense because Danny Pinter's never played left tackle before. It probably wouldn't go too great right away. And even if you moved Quentin Nelson to left tackle, well, okay, great. You have to fill left guard somewhere. And you have what? Danny Pinter? Okay, you'd use Danny Pinter, but now you have no depth on your offensive line anymore. So, it's like you have to get a left tackle. It's a must. You can't go without it. It has to be addressed. I mean, edge you can address later if you want to because you have something to fall back on, but you don't have that right now. And honestly, I don't know if you can give us somebody that you would think if the Colts stayed at 21 right now, who do you think they would try to get at left tackle? Is there somebody that pops out to you?
I'm seeing a lot of talk about, and I'll be honest with you, I've been so focused in the offseason news. It's not typically like me to not be all in the mock drafts because I live for that stuff. I was looking at one the Colts put out today. A lot of talk about the kid from Virginia Tech and then Clemson. And then when you look at the edge rusher, a lot of talk about Gregory from Miami. To the point of your commenters, though, they are right. When you look at the sense and another reason I put left tackle so high, when you're going to have to pay Braden Smith, Quentin Nelson, and Darius Leonard coming up here so shortly,
yes,
getting a very rookie-friendly deal for 4 and then potentially player option for 5 helps out your salary cap a ton.
Yes. Yeah, totally.
Right.
That's why we've been all over the don't address left tackle in free agency, because if you address it in free agency, you're most likely going to have to pay somebody a higher amount of money than what you want to pay somebody. You probably save a couple million by probably more than a couple million just going with a rookie left tackle in the draft at the first or second round than going after somebody in free agency. Like, people have been talking about Orlando Brown. There's people have been talking about Trent Williams and guys like that are going to want a payday because they're good players. And we just don't have the money to afford to pay 4 guys on our offensive line premier dollars.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Who are you guys looking at left tackle or edge coming out in this draft? And I'll pose it back to you. Are those your 1 and 2 in terms of needs?
Well, I already said, yeah, for me, yeah, they are left tackle, edge rusher there. But like you said, they're very interchangeable to me. Like if you go and take it, because I realize also that okay, this tackle class is very deep. A lot of people have said as much. And so I'm like, if you say you address a corner or defensive end in round 1, and there's still a solid offensive tackle there you feel comfortable with, maybe you trade up for a guy. I don't know. Maybe you do something like that and you go get your guy there who maybe any other year, kind of like wide receiver last year, right? Like there were so many good guys that any other year would be first round picks were falling to the 2nd, 3rd, 4th round. And maybe that's the same case here with offensive tackle. Like one of those guys who any other year would be a first round pick, lock right away. more falls to that second round, and then you'll get a first round talent there in that second round. So that's kind of my thought. But, if you do stay at 21, I like what you said. I think Darisaw is how you pronounce his last name.
Darisaw.
Yeah, he's a really good one. There's a lot of freaking
There is a lot of left tackles, dude. There's like 7 or 8 of them that a lot of people keep saying could potentially go in the first round. They got that much talent. I mean, and if Ballard decides to do one of those things where he trades back, which we know he's capable of doing, he might do that now because he still has that first pick as leverage to move back. I mean, we could still get a guy in the second round that, maybe there's somebody like at the 30th pick or something that really wants to move up to get somebody that they really like. Then, maybe they get a second or third pick out of it to replace what they lost from Wentz.
Right.
Then, it makes total sense. They could get a guy maybe like it's just all depending on who you have value, because I've heard guys say Darisaw could fall to the late rounds because Cosme and other guys will or move up. Then I hear Darisaw is going to be the second left tackle taken. There's Leatherwood that's behind him. There's Eichenberg. There's Redunce. And Slater could fall. It just depends on how his flexibility goes. There are so many names. I'm okay with any of them.
Yeah.
I'm honestly okay with any of them. Whoever Ballard picks is that we know is the guy. I mean, edge rush out of the draft, there's really not a proven commodity to me that speaks, Ballard needs to take him at that point. The only guy that I would say maybe you invest that 21st pick into is Jalen Phillips, because Jalen Phillips is an absolute freak. I mean, the way he's built, 6'5", 260 pounds, and he just looks massive and he runs hard. I mean, this guy is just an athlete. That's what he is right now, though, an athlete. He's not fundamentally great yet, but, if he put it all together, I mean, holy cow, imagine that guy coming off the edge. I mean, that's insane. That's a really fast, strong guy, but,
yeah.
There's a lot of ifs. There's not a lot of proven defensive ends in this draft right now.
Yeah, and all the names you mentioned, let's face it, over the next week to week and a half, those are all going to shuffle again once people start to see their grades from the combine. So
that's very true. Yeah, that's very true. And then also with the franchise tag, we'll know some of these guys, maybe some, we've been vocal in saying we think you should address pass rusher in free agency, because there's a lot of potential names that are going to hit the open market. Carl Lawson, Romeo Aquara. I couldn't say his name for a while, but now I think I got it. Just to name a few, there's a lot more that could hit the open market. Are there some guys there, Chris, that interest you at defensive end? And how do you think the Colts should address the edge rush?
So yeah, Carl Lawson is the big one that we get a lot about, and I know Kevin's high on him. So that's the main one that we've been focusing on. He's going to do a podcast tomorrow that we're going to release where he's going to address a little bit more as to what he thinks. I kind of, in all honesty, leave a lot of those projections to him, and just produce the show and make sure everything runs correct. He's got way more knowledge of it than I do. But Carl Lawson's definitely a name that's up there. I wanted to kind of make a joke tweet earlier. He kind of did the waving emoji, and how everyone's kind of been taking JJ Watt's tweets and twisting them in a fun way to say, that's who's coming here. Try to figure out a way that means he's coming to Indianapolis. But yeah, there are some good edge rushers out there that I think we need to look into. And again, that just goes back to my point of whichever we address early on in free agency, it's just going to help me know a little bit more of the blueprint that Chris Ballard has. Because again, supposedly if we read between the lines, we'll be able to see. So I'm trying to figure out what these lines are so I can read them.
Vera Tucker is another name that I don't know if any of us mentioned. Vera Tucker from USC played a little bit of both. So he's been projected first round. I mean, the list just keeps going. It's hilarious. I keep forgetting some of these guys, but Cody, it's funny because even Jason was saying that report is BS. Even Jason was saying that's BS. So I guess this guy trying to say he has his insiders. Apparently, he must
not
be
true.
wrong.
The Colts did not offer more, so the Colts probably didn't even offer anything. Honestly,
right?
I mean, that's just so un-Chris Ballard like to do that.
Yeah,
if that was Carl Lawson, okay, yeah, I get that. He's a premier guy at a premier position, But JJ Watt, like you're not doing that. You're not. Like that's just not Chris Ballard at all. So it's always interesting. Like I think as Colts fans, we've been able to observe Chris Ballard's kind of moves the last few off seasons, and now we kind of have an idea of how this guy works. Right? He's very, very intelligent. Like he knows what he wants. He's gonna, like you said, he's gonna set a price, and if that doesn't match that price, they're not gonna go for it. I mean, that's how he. It'll obviously remains to be seen, but that's kind of how he kind of got a steal if Carson Wentz indeed does get back to his, form. With Carson Wentz, he doesn't panic. He just says,
well, it also helped that the Eagles were dumb in the first place to offer so much. It took away a lot of his value. The Colts obviously were not the best team when it came to trade value wise. They wanted to, I'm sure that the Bears were willing to give up more than what the Colts were. But the issue you have is that, when you try to use a fake deal that the Colts had and try to leverage that with the Bears, and then the Bears say, nah, it's okay. We're good. And then, Wentz's agent then says, nah, man, it's either Indianapolis or nothing. You guys will be screwed with it. Then, Howie Roseman put himself in a bad position. And you're right. Ballard's so great that way because he doesn't put himself into many bad situations. I mean, I look at the Rams. I look at what the Rams are doing right now. They've gone the opposite direction of what Ballard likes to do. Build through free agency and get your team. Now, they're good, and they certainly got a chance to go to the Super Bowl, but the issue is if that Matt Stafford trade doesn't work out and they don't get to the Super Bowl with Matt Stafford, then all of that thing of trying to get Jalen Ramsey there to get rid of Gurley and to bring in Stafford, all of these things, then it all would have been a waste. It would have all been a waste to get rid of all these draft picks just to get these guys. You take that chance if you think you're there. And that's why I think Ballard has been a little more aggressive recently with doing it because he wanted to rebuild the team. And now that he feels that young nucleus is ready to go, now he feels he plugs in some really good talent into some places. And then that helps because now he feels that the team is ready for that now.
Yeah, and you have to know what you're walking into. I mean, when you're in Indianapolis versus LA, I think the Rams went from 2013 to 2022 without a first-round pick, something of that nature.
Jeez.
It's something ludicrous, but they know we can build within trading and free agency because we can sell guys on, come to LA, build a brand, live in Southern California. You can do all these other things off the field if you want to. Just make sure on Sunday you're ready to go. Indianapolis, we're not that way. We have to stack up picks. Even though Indianapolis is a great place to live, I think when players get here, they clearly love it because they do stay in the area after they retire. But you, as a GM and a president of a football operation, you can't necessarily sell Indianapolis the way you can sell LA, which is fine. But that just means we have to hit on our draft picks, and the free agents that we go get are typically one-year guys like Xavier Rhodes and prove-it deals. And so you kind of have a little less leeway than some of these other markets that can, we'll just blow it up, and 2 years later we'll just start over with a new team.
Yeah, right, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I loved about Ballard, man, is like he gives us a chance to like have a really competitive team, but like also he doesn't ever like mortgage the future to do that. Like even if, say worst case scenario, Carson Wentz is terrible. He plays just like he did last year. You move on from him. Okay, you're really not in that as bad of a spot. Say if the same thing would happen to like the Rams, like you mentioned. Like you can still win, right? You still have your first round pick this year. Potentially, if he's like terrible, you would have a first round pick next year, right? And then maybe you go and trade up for a quarterback next year. Like you still give yourselves options. Right. To go, get your guy if indeed Carson Wentz isn't the guy, but you still get, can potentially tap into that, that talent that you have there with Carson Wentz. And that's what I think the beauty of Frank Reich and his staff. It's like you can just basically give them like a mold of clay. Sometimes it doesn't work, but they've gotten a lot out of some guys that like literally just bring in for the talent and they get the most out of these guys. Mm-hmm. So that's what I love about this organization, man, is like they just do that. They do that so well, probably better than about anybody in the league right now. And that's why they keep finding guys on reasonable prices. That's why they had so much cap space for the longest time. They can make the big swinger moves like going and getting DeForest Buckner, making a trade for Carson Wentz because they've hit so much on these other deals with other guys.
Yeah. Yeah, my hope is just based on the way that they evaluate players. You know, they have former Green Beret that's in the front office that puts these guys through these personality trait tests to not only look at them from a physical standpoint, but more or less the mental. And so maybe it is someone like a Carson Wentz or a Xavier Rhodes, not saying that they're – especially Minnesota. I don't know about Minnesota, but clearly the Eagles say that locker room was a mess.
Yeah.
You bring these guys into a surrounding that is made up of men and leaders and guys that to their core are good people. That might be all it takes for somebody. That might be all it takes to flip the switch and to realize, oh, I was in a crappy position to start off with. Let's say if the Colts would have went up, like that's what I would have tricked myself into if the Colts would have got Sam Darnold. I'd have been like, as much as I don't want him here, the Jets have been a disaster. They have ruined him. Him coming to a place where he's going to have leaders around him, maybe that's what it takes. So you never know.
Sure.
Bars in the tuck. I'd rather try Smith at left tackle before moving Q there. Well, thank you for the super chat. No, I would not want to move Smith from where he is because he's been dominant where he is. Why would you want to move him? You know, it's the same thing with Nelson. I mean, he's been dominant in the position that he's in. Why would you want to move it only to have to replace that same spot again? Braden Smith this last year was a top 5 tackle. I mean, he's the only tackle in the league that didn't allow a sack this year. So, you know, I mean, why would you want to move that? But yeah, with the Wentz stuff, you know, from what we've been told from other people is that Wentz was never really a bad locker room guy. They said it was more of 1 or 2 bad apples in the locker room that didn't like Wentz, and the media spun that kind of, you know, inner circle of idea that maybe Wentz isn't the big guy anymore. And then, you know, when Nick Foles won them the championship, that was the worst thing that could have happened for Carson Wentz, because then people were like questioning Carson Wentz, like, oh, would Wentz have done that? Like, we don't know. You never gave him a shot afterwards to do it because, you know, it's not like the guy was terrible before he went down. Your team was the best team in football when he went down. So why are you acting like he was so bad? I mean, you know, coming into the situation where he is now, you know, reforming with his old coach, the guy that helped him out, and, you know, being in a better locker room scenario where all the guys seem to be embracing the new guy. I just think it's a better confidence building situation. And like Cody said earlier, if it doesn't work out, hey, the Jacob Eason stands that follow us, I mean, they'll love this, because then Jacob Eason gets the chance to come in and see what he can do if Carson Wentz doesn't pan out.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to at least seeing him in some preseason. I just want to see Jacob Eason throw a football at this point.
Yeah, right. Exactly. I want to see him throw that 70-yard bomb that we saw in warm-ups. I want to see that.
Yeah. Well, Chris, a little bit more of a personal question here, I guess. So first off, when did you become a Colts fan? What was like the first game that you remember?
So I was born in Tennessee. My dad was a huge Volunteers fan, so I was raised a Tennessee Vols fan. So Peyton, we moved to Indy in 2001. So when I moved to Indianapolis, it was right after the Titans had moved from – where the Oilers had moved from Houston to Memphis for a year and then to Nashville. So I was a Titans fan to begin with. And then once I moved to Indy, having Peyton Manning back again, it was like, okay. So 2001, I'm a Colts fan. The first game I remember, I feel like they played the Jets early on and because they were in the AFC at the time. What was it? Because it was before we had the AFC South.
Oh,
so
gosh, I remember.
Us, Miami, New England, the Jets, like we were all in the same division. And the Bills, we were all in the same division, I think. Or maybe the Bills were with Pittsburgh. Anyway, I just remember moving to Indy. I was excited that we had a team. I do remember, to be quite honest with you, it was a preseason game against the Saints. And I was so happy to have an NFL team in my city that I watched this preseason game as if it was the Super Bowl. I remember sitting at home, I think it was a Thursday or Friday night, and just watching the Colts versus the Saints in this preseason game. And I thought it was awesome. And the first game I ever went to was Colts versus Cowboys. towards the end of Emmitt Smith's career. So I thought that was pretty cool. We got tickets from like my mom's boss or coworker or something like that.
Gotcha.
That's awesome, man. That's so cool. It's cool to see how everybody kind of their different stories, because everybody, like, I grew up in Indiana, but not everybody does, right? And so it's kind of cool to see how different people become different fans. So many people because of Peyton Manning, like you. That's so cool, man. And, and so good to see him, man, like now be a Hall of Fame inductee. Like, man, that's the guy that made me fall in love with football as well. So, man, just shout out to Peyton Manning, man, again. Like, I can think of no other player that's more deserving of that.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, and the way that he's shaped, an entire state. We're known as the basketball state, but realistically, when we put out a Pacer podcast, for instance, on YouTube, it could get 500 to 1,000 views. We put out a Colts podcast, it's got 3,000 views in the first 48 hours. Like, people love Colts football, and it's just awesome to be a part of the community.
Yeah, and it helps too that it's not as rich of a market either for media. Like, there's a couple of us that do it, but there's guys that want to start doing it, but they're not like, seeing it through very often. I mean, I can name like 5 or 6 different Philadelphia people that do it, but I can really only name about 3 or 4 different big Colts podcasts that do it all the time. It stinks. And hopefully, we get a lot more people in this market that continue to want to do that. Cause Cody and I have been wanting to try to get more people to do podcasts. It's just want to see people keep doing it.
Yeah. No, and it is like, you guys do it the right way. It's one of those things where you have to commit to it. You're constantly putting out, and everyone hates like the word content, but that's what it is. You're constantly putting things out for your readers and your followers and your listeners to consume. And credit to you guys for continuing to keep up the grind.
It gets to the point where, you're right. It's at a point where you start doing it for a while and then you're like, well, what's the point of it? Cody and I had that a couple times right before we hit 1,000 subscribers. A lot of times we were saying, it just doesn't really seem like a lot of fun. It seems more like work. And then, once the numbers started improving, then we're like, oh, well, see, this is it. This is the reason why you did it. So that way now you start reaching a lot more people. This is what you just got to get there.
Yep. Absolutely.
Yeah. It is so much fun, man. Like, it's so much fun to just, and it's crazy, like, to think like, man, so many people like actually care what I think about my favorite team. Like, that's just for me, man, like a dream. Like, I can't believe I'm in this spot. Like, I can't believe we're both in this spot. Like, it's just incredible, man. Like, and so that's a shout out to all of our listeners, listeners of this podcast, listeners of Kevin's Corner. Like, I know we have a lot of like intermingling, a lot of people who listen to both. So you guys are awesome. We really appreciate you. And obviously, if you guys haven't checked them out yet, be sure to check them out. They're awesome, both really awesome dudes and all that stuff. So thanks, Chris. It's been a lot of fun, man. I don't want to take up all your night. Normally we can stream for a couple hours, but sometimes it gets a little bit too much. But man, it's been a lot. It's been a lot of fun to have this conversation about all things Colts football. It seems like the circles kind of died down a little bit, so that's good.
Yeah, sorry about that.
No worries, man.
All good, man. I've had multiple times where this man's internet craps out on us, and I have to do the live stream solo sometimes because his internet couldn't keep up.
Hey, it's now no longer an issue because I just moved in on Friday, so getting my man cave set up a little bit, and it's looking good so far.
Yeah, I didn't feel bad for you when you're like, hey, can you come on a different time? I still got stuff to move. I was like,
right. I was like, I can fit it in. And then I was like, wait, probably not. I still have a lot to pack. So
moving is the absolute worst.
Yes.
Yeah, totally.
I'm just glad it's done.
But yeah, thanks guys for having me on. I really appreciate it. Of course, we'll be interactive still on Twitter. Thanks to all of your listeners and viewers today. And go listen to Kevin's Corner if you guys want to, but you guys keep up the great work because I do enjoy listening to what you guys have to say.
Appreciate that, man. Always great to have you on. For all of our listeners, to the 110 of you at the peak here today, appreciate all of you tuning in. Thank you guys so much. And like it said in the title, we have a giveaway coming up here soon. Once we hit 6,000 subscribers, we're going to start doing a couple giveaways here soon. So thank you guys again for all the continued support. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. And as always, go Colts.